Hi, Raghu. Thank you so much for joining us and for contributing to the pandemic reflection at Tangled. We have a few questions for you about your artistic practice and how it's been impacted and changed during this last 2 years. So our first question for you is, how did you have to adapt your art practice through the pandemic years?
Yeah, I mean, as we all know, it just appeared, and then we all had to quickly sort of pack our bags and figure out things. And yeah, one of the things is that my wife and I, we both were in the middle of an art project, which in fact it had started a couple of years before. We had done a project, the main part of the project, which was funded from a university in Scotland, from UK arts funding agency. We had done that part in Indian Punjab, looking at the border and the relationship between the two sides of the border. So we had done that, and then a bunch of work was done. But in 2019 December, we had received a Canada Council grant to go to the other side of the border, that is in Pakistan, Lahore, and then we did a workshop there. Three Canadian artists, including me, Jason Berg, and one more artist from Toronto, Jagdeep Rana. So three of us, we were there, and then the show was going to, the two workshop was going to culminate into the show in Abbotsford, BC, at a gallery, where, I mean, the idea was that two sides which don't meet each other because of the partition, the works come here, and some of the artists also come to Abbotsford and meet in a neutral space, our country, Canada. And but everything fell apart because we had done the two workshops, and in 2020 this hit, and then we said, okay, that summer the show was supposed to happen in 2020, and that everything got thrown apart, and we had to totally reschedule everything. I'm just giving you one example as to how we had to think as we were running. And then my own personal, at that around the same time, we moved from Vancouver to Bowen Island. I had my own studio space, but which meant that none of my colleagues from Vancouver or other part of BC would be easily, be able to access my work in my studio. And also, again, as I began with the international workshop, it became tough to travel. I was supposed to go this February, March to India for an international workshop, which totally got thrown out of the window. So, I mean, struggles, finding things on the way, figuring it out. I mean, it's been tough. Yeah.
How did the pandemic impact or sort of change the way you're making art?
Come to a standstill. Even now, struggling to figure out where do we go. So in terms of my own art making, I found a kind of moving to Bowen Island, I found a kind of sanctuary, so to speak, where it's peaceful. There's a lot of distance between people, so that helps to keep that social distancing. And then I've created a bunch of work during the pandemic, interestingly, and then that whole body was shown at a gallery on the island. So it kind of has become kind of local, because for last many years I've been traveling, being international, having workshops, and artists coming to Vancouver, a lot of these kind of interactions. From that, I became a kind of focused more on being local, So yeah, I created my art here, and I would do some workshops with people from the island and go to theater on the island, go to music for concerts on the island. So it's kind of from a global, international sort of that kind of life has become kind of a local sort of art making practice. We are struggling. We are trying to still try and get some artists over from Argentina, which should happen in April, from India, which didn't work out because of the visa situation. People coming from India, that didn't happen. Fortunately, the artist from filmmaker from Argentina, he has a 10-year visa, so he can come. It's become more of a local. It hasn't impacted my art making in itself in terms of what kind of art did I do. It has restricted in the sense I was 2 years ago thinking of making an audio video project, interviewing people using their voices and all that, and that I have now restricted. I still have to do. I'm still working on a project where I will be interacting with people like how we are doing now via Zoom and recording and using the voice. But that might affect the quality of the sound. But still, I mean, that's what I should say. How it has impacted or altered my art practice.
I want to ask you a question that's not in the questions that I had sent us, and kind of like the location that you're in now. Like it seems like you're in Bone Island for most of your time versus all of these other places that you were visiting before the pandemic. So I'm just wondering about your perception of time, how that's maybe shifted.
Mm. Yeah, it's a very important question because I have felt in the last 2 years the time. I mean, at moments I do feel that because I have a 10-year-old kid and I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to spend some time gardening, which in itself is something that I had not thought of 2 years ago. So the time has kind of slowed down. It's compared to 2 years ago, and I've been able to do a lot of stuff within that time as well. I drive, for example, school bus on the island. After I moved here, I said, okay, it's an interesting thing. 2 hours in the morning, 2 to 3 hours in the afternoon, and then I get some time to do my own art practice. And so, it's in a way, I've become busier. At the same time, there's more time. It's a very strange feeling. Yeah. Yeah. I hope I answered your question. I made sense.
Oh, definitely. Do you find that the timing of the day-to-day has impact on your art practice?
It does. But I also get to think when I'm sitting on the bus waiting for the kids. I read, I get a book. I'm surfing the net, and and then I sort of do a lot of prep in my head during that time, a lot of introspection, a lot of thinking, and then when I come to the studio, I'm already in that zone, in that mode. So and I also have become very conscious of time. So in a way, there's a lot of time. At the same time, I'm giving it a slot. Okay, from this time to this time, I'm going to be making some drawings. And the next day, this time to this time, I'll do some stuff on the comp, and so it's I've become more efficient using time.
Yeah, it sounds like the bus driving is very meditative almost. You have these
on the islands
spaces.
Yeah, on the island, because it's a totally different. It's kind of hilly, and you see the sea, and of course, getting up at 5 a.m. is not nice, but it can be raining and dark, stressful. But sometimes it's also peaceful because I always loved being in the hilly sort of part of the world. and there's not a lot of traffic, so there's not a lot of that sort of a thing. So lots of trees, and you get to see the sea. So it is meditative, I have to say. Yeah.
That is so interesting. Like, I want to make a comment and then ask you a question, if that's okay. It's not part of the ones that we send an email, so feel free not to answer if you don't want to. But for what I hear is like, so you shifted your practice from like moving around to start really connecting to the land and the space that you live in and with the people around you, right? Like, in a way, it's like, the kids who go to school in your neighborhood, like you drive them. And in a way, you have this like sort of responsibility, and you get to know these kids who also live around you, who are your kids' friends, perhaps, right? And I wonder how this new engagement that you have found with the pandemic, and because you cannot go around all the time and everywhere as freely as we used to, how does that integration of like connecting with the land and the space that you are and the people that live around you have affected what you are making right now?
One of the things is that I had already started working on a project before the pandemic. So that project is kind of continuing. It's called Mending Cracks on Trauma and Healing. And, so because of my disability and the PTSD that I still suffer from, that is that's going on in one level. And the other is I've started a project with the Canada Council funding called Looking at Dissent. So, but being here on the island, the accessibility to, of course, being the school bus driver, I mean, everybody knows me now on the island, like I'm walking and they're like, hey, how are you doing? And so that has given me a new accessibility. And I'm new, like I'm just living here for less than two years, but lots of people know us, and then it's easy to, say something. And, if I put something on the Facebook, there's a Bone Island, and a few of us parents do classes, like one of the parents did something on, he's a professor at Simon Fraser University in BC, in Vancouver. He deals with international politics, and so he did a project with the kids, my son and their son, on refugee, and then now on the Ukraine-Russia situation. And then I did in between 2-3 sessions on art, how to look, how to observe, how to see things, and so I'm engaged with that now, and then we'll be doing more of that. So there's that kind of accessibility to these kind of possibilities. Yeah. And I don't know how that might influence my own art making. Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. The last question that we have for you is, what new wisdom do you feel do you have that affects or influences your current art practice?
That's how I have a disability, and that's how my contact with Tangled Arts is that it made me feel that nothing is permanent. I mean, to believe in impermanence, not to take things for granted. So now pandemic has also made me feel that I can't even believe that 2019 December, January 2020, and then post that to it seems like pre-COVID, post-COVID, so that kind of I feel that there's a certain sense of humility, and not take things for granted, and to be mindful of things, what we do, and be careful and respect people, and so that's not directly connected to my art practice, but that does influence how I would create art, and how would I want it to be shown in a gallery. I'm thinking of not commercial, not formal spaces. I'm thinking of informal spaces, where, or outdoor spaces where people can, amongst trees, so people can just walk by and not be inside a space. And maybe they don't need to wear masks then, and then be a little bit more free. So it's kind of giving me these ideas of, how to think of other options. Not that it's anything new. Lots of artists and performers and art practitioners have done this before. So, yeah.
And also maybe like how to heighten the connection.
People to go find it, There was an artist who had done a huge sculpture with wood on the island, and it was not mentioned at all where it is. So people had to go look for it and stuff. He was and then recently I hadn't seen it at all. It was done 3 years ago, and then now just came to know that he dismantled it. He said it was time to bring it down. We didn't get to see it, so it's possible on the island, and that share with people. There needs to be, I think, a lot more, artist initiatives and spaces that one can access much easily than preparing, 2 years in advance, because whatever we prepared before 2020 January is very different today.
And it also goes back to the ideas that you were talking about, like kind of embracing impermanence as well.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Are there any works specifically that you've made during this time that you would like to tell us about?
I made this one right behind me. This Tarp, you can see. It's a painted on a tarp, and it's a sculpture of. I can share an image if you want via email. That you can take a look. It's the image. It was part of the show at the gallery on the island. It's a Jain. It's like Buddhism, the Jainism in India, which didn't become as popular as Buddhism, and it's one of the the first spiritual leader who supposed to have stood up and done penance for many years, and it's a sculpture of him, Mahavira, which is I connect with it a lot since my growing up days in India, and I created this on a tarp with using acrylic paint, black, but almost using it like ink, very dilute. I had it on the floor, and I would walk on it, and then I would throw it, and then the whole idea was to make it sort of appear. So if you see it from far, it would, or up close, it's just like blotches of ink and kind of stuff. And so anyway, while making it, the idea was of this person who was the spiritual leader who talked about impermanence and the spirituality and the need to be kind and need to look at peace and look at not be selfish and that sort of stuff. So I was reflecting on his ideas of that while making it, and I also made on a tarp and not a canvas, and it's just hung on the wall, not stretched, and I would just fold it up and put it on the side when it's not up. I don't know if it's an appropriate piece that would reflect what's going on now, but it's just that it was made during this time for the show. Yeah.
And what does the materiality mean to you?
Tarp, it's a good question. Tarp is, again, tarpaulin is it's a cotton tarpaulin that I bought from an old shop in India many years ago, and metaphorically it means impermanence. It's used for making tents. It's made for people, what do you call the immigrant labor, in the big cities in India. They come from villages. They construct big structures, and then they pack up and then move to the next site. So, and also, that was one of the metaphor, the ideas that I had, like on the surface itself. And the paint, I do use acrylic for a lack of a better other medium, but I dilute it so much that I just use the black darkened water, so. And the process of making is also like I'm walking on it. It's not like a precious piece that So I throw paint. So yeah, and the image almost looks like it just emerges out. It's not painted on. So yeah.
I really think that's beautiful because, again, it reflects like you reflect your idea of impermanence all over, from the material, from the techniques, or the way of art making. And again, like thank you so much for like having us and like talking to us and telling us about you more.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.